Hey everybody, it's Monster back again with Opus Gaming, and I'm here today to bring you guys a pretty different video for the channel. This is going to be our first time trying a discussion style video on the channel, and the discussion topic is going to be, is the One Piece card game for you? We're going to be tackling it in a couple different ways, but the reason that we're talking about this topic is because I think it's a pretty interesting thing to talk about. We brought it up amongst ourselves on the team while we were out at Nats for Digimon out in LA, and it's been something I've been talking to more than just my teammates, just a lot of players along the way. So I've been working on this for a little while now. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. We're going to look at it from, like I said before, a lot of different ways. One of the ways being from me personally, just somebody who has played all of Bandai's current card games that you can enter like regionals, cups for, and that they're still currently supporting like right now in North America. And the way that we're going to take that is just kind of like taking all of their card games and making just like kind of a sphere of them. We're not going to be looking at a lot of the other card games that other companies have. It's really just going to be Bandai card games because that's what we're playing right now, and that's where we have the most expertise. And we're just going to be comparing them from like a casual aspect or a competitive aspect, and those are going to be the big ends of the spectrum that we're going to be looking at those card games from today. So one thing to note before we really jump into it is that we're not going to be talking about Battle Spirits because as of recording this video, Battle Spirits isn't officially out yet, and there's a lot to say. So if you guys do end up enjoying this video and you guys do want to see a Battle Spirits version of this, let me know because we can talk about where the Battle Spirits will fit into. You guys will see how we kind of organize this. So the other way that we're going to look at this from though is, and I think it's important to talk about this because this isn't something that we were talking about very much on the team, and I think it's a conversation to be had amongst a lot of people, but it's the different card spaces or card game spaces that different people enjoy. I think there are card games that are really for very competitive players, and then I think there are card games that are for very casual players, and I don't think that they necessarily cross over super well when you're on the far ends of the spectrum. I think that if you're a really casual player and you're trying to get into something super competitive, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel almost impossible, right? At times when you're playing against a lot of really good players, it can make you a lot better of a player when you're playing in those super hard adversities, but for some people it can make them just not want to play the game. So I want to talk about finding a space, a card game space that is best for you and kind of how to identify that as a player. So these are all things that we're going to talk about kind of going down the video. We're going to talk about Bandai, how it kind of developed, and how each of these different games are different, better, and where they came from the last game, and kind of where we're at today with the One Piece card game, because that's kind of the newest one that's released as of recording of this video. Before we dive in and start talking about everything, if you're not subscribed, drop a sub down below. We're on our way to 1,000 subscribers. We're almost up to 600. So if you guys haven't subbed and you guys have been seeing my content, leave a sub down below, leave a like, leave a comment. You guys already know all that stuff helps us push this stuff out to the algorithm, helps support the channel quite a bit, and I've been appreciating all of the love, all of the support on everything that we've been doing so far. So let's jump into the conversation. We're gonna start off with like kind of like a timeline and a quick summary of each of the card games that Bandai has released that like I said before, in this kind of sphere and this currently supported card games. And we're going to go one by one as they release and kind of talk about what they represent on the scale and why I think that. So we're going to start off with the Dragon Ball Super card game. Dragon Ball Super right now is, first of all, the first thing I want to say about it is that it's my favorite game to play that I play right now. I love Dragon Ball Super and it's really, really fun. It's a crazy competitive game, and I think that's the number one thing to be stated about the game is that it's competitive and it's difficult. When I say competitive, I think some of the traits that make this card game competitive that lend to it, I would say, are how many sets there are. There's 20 sets in the game, and it really lends to like somebody who wants to do a deep dive, really learn an archetype or a character or a play style, and you want to learn how to do that and like master it by doing playtesting repetitions, learning more, testing out new things, and just really putting in the effort, right? And if you're willing to put in that effort, and that's like what you enjoy about card games and what you're looking for, which is something I think a lot of card game players are looking for, especially people maybe taking breaks from other card game spaces that are naturally competitive. When you're looking at these different Bandai card games, I think Dragon Ball is going to represent the most competitive one, and I think that for those reasons that I was stating before, that's why it's really just going to be, when if you're coming from something else and you're looking for something to like deep dive into, Dragon Ball can really, really support that. So Dragon Ball is going to be like the number one most competitive game that Bandai offers right now, and it's like very just kind of like difficult to play in the sense that there's a lot of thinking, and usually the better player wins. I think those are like kind of the biggest traits and attributes that we can talk about for competitive nature on this topic right now. But there's a lot of other things, right? Like the combo system in the game being very intricate. So that's going to be something Well, let's touch on that actually really quickly. The combo system being super intricate is going to be where that adds on for the game being competitive is that it really rewards you if you have natural game sense from other card games. If you can naturally keep hand advantage, like not just count, but comparison between you and your opponent, understand where you're at in card advantage at all times, not just my opponent's at 12, I'm at 10. My opponent's at whatever, I'm at whatever. Knowing some of the cards that your opponent can possibly have, how super combos work, how using card advantage in certain situations. I might be on 5 cards, but I have 4 super combos in my hand. I can push here. I can fully defend myself here, and my opponent won't think so. So if my opponent dumps hand, I can be in advantage, and that comes up so much in Dragon Ball. So that's one of the things that I think coming from other card games, like that's going to be something that is really going to support you going into this card game. And that's kind of one of the reasons why it's not going to be as easy for somebody who's very casual to get into Dragon Ball, because they're not going to have those game senses and those small little things that are just natural for those of us who have been playing other TCGs for 10, 15, 20, 25 years now. So moving on from Dragon Ball, because I can talk about that game for so long because I love it so much, is the Digimon card game. Another card game that is extremely close to my heart. I love Digimon so much. And if Dragon Ball's competitiveness was the one thing that I stated for Dragon Ball, the one thing I'll say about Digimon is I have never laughed so much with my opponent in a card game ever. If you can really enjoy the space of the RNG in the card game, if you can enjoy the, like, how much the advantage can just be flipped by security, which is just another RNG factor, but so it really is just comes down to the RNG in the game. I think that you can truly enjoy Digimon. I think that's going to be one of the biggest factors on if you can enjoy Digimon. And one of the things that, or if you will enjoy Digimon to an extreme extent, I think anybody can enjoy the game because it's one of those games that you can just pick up and play. The reason I think that if Dragon Ball is on the far end of competitive, the reason I think Digimon is on the far end of casual is because of the massive number, or the massive impact that RNG has, and as well as just like kind of the way the game is, right? It lends a lot to anybody who either hasn't played TCGs, or the exact opposite side of the coin is people who have played a lot of other TCGs in the past, and people who like understand what it takes to be really, really good at TCGs and things like that, but they just want to play something lighthearted. They just want to finish work and they want to come and play games with their friends and like have these really crazy matches where they don't have to be thinking 7 turns ahead and be keeping track of hand advantage and blah blah blah, and just play out a game, right? Digimon's really, really good for that. So I think that those are the two types of players that kind of are going to really enjoy these enjoy Digimon. But I think that the casualness of it really comes from the sense of somebody who hasn't really played a lot of card games, or maybe just isn't fully developed in like a lot of the card game skills. So like we were talking about before with Dragon Ball Super, where you can have this kind of innate sense of keeping track of how many cards are in hand, cards on board, cards in trash, like where you're at in general advantage. Do you have more resources than your opponent? That's not something that like you can just pick up a card game for the first time and be like, I'm going to keep track of everything every turn, as well as playing the game at a decent pace. So with that, I think that Digimon on that far end of the spectrum, the casualness is going to come from the RNG factor that's going to be present in the game, as well as the just the not hand-holdiness, I would say, but like how much the game helps you through the game by digivolving to draw a card, how much cycle you get throughout the game, and how much you see cards. That does help when it works, but that will also be a hindrance when you only see level 4s and 6s in the game. And that's something we'll talk about when we're talking about resources. But that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, and that's the One Piece card game. Where does that fall? I think that something important to say is that that's going to fall, as far as card game spaces, is going to fall smack dab in the middle of where Dragon Ball is with competitiveness and where Digimon is with casualness. Where I think that we'll talk about the casualness first for One Piece. I think one thing that nobody can really deny is that without an aggressive draw engine in the game, there's a certain level of RNG where if you don't see certain parts of your strategy, and when I say certain parts, we can break it down to a very simple early game, mid game, or late game. So if you have a very structured early game setup, like for example, something everybody knows is for Green Kinemon, Okiku is a very good card to start with in the early game, right? It's a very powerful card to board. It's not your only card to board, but it is a card where if you don't start off with Okiku, right, you can feel like you're just not in we'll say Okiku or Yamato, those types of cards, right? You still have like Nekomamushis and things like that, but if you completely miss on your start, I'm talking about you don't have those cards and you have like Momonosuke's that can grab you 2k counters and then like 5 cost laws. That's not early game cards. You can play the Momonosuke's and they can kind of defend you cards, but you miss out on the same power level that you would have been at for having something like an Okiku or a Yamato. And where that is RNG is just that you just can't force it. You can't really make it happen in that card game just because there's not a lot of draw in the game. So the cards that you see in the early game as well as like the life triggers add a pretty decent level of RNG. But going all the way over to the other side of the competitive side that I think One Piece adds a lot is just like we were talking about with the combo system in Dragon Ball. One Piece's counter system is almost exactly the same, not exactly the same, but it's a very big deal. Keeping track of how many cards your opponent has on their defensive resource is a big deal. It's like they cut how much thinking you have to do in half for when you're comboing and countering cards. In the Dragon Ball Super card game, you have to combo things from hand and keep track of a lot more resources and not forget to whittle down your opponent's life at the right pace and whittle down your opponent's hand at the right pace. But it's not quite as intense as those other as Dragon Ball Super. It's the only other card game we're talking about in the space. The reason that that's important is I think it's just a developed game. I think it's a lot more inviting to more people to have a counter system kind of like that, as well as the One Piece card game does have a very good depth of leaders and character cards and event cards and I guess stage cards that you can play that really add a good diversity to your playstyle. You can really build a deck, and if you're the pilot of that deck, if I want to build Green Kinemon as a leader, I can build that. You can say that it's just Discount Kid. You can say that it's just like worst Kinemon. But if I do have a really good strategy, I have a curve, if I'm really trying to utilize cards like Denjiro that don't work in any other strategy, and that's the cornerstone of my playstyle, I can do that in One Piece, just like I can make like Soul Striker the cornerstone of my strategy in Dragon Ball Super, purely off of my game knowledge, my player skill, and the competitive nature that I have as a player. And that's something that's super supported in the One Piece card game, and I think that merging those two things together, the RNG nature of like how much they're allowing draw and cycle in the game, as well as for example, for one of the casual aspects of the game, with one of the competitive aspects of the game being how much you can really dive in and make any leader work. I've seen people win with King. I've seen people win with Magellan. I've beaten people with Purple Blue Kaido. All these leaders that people are saying are teeter on unplayable, I think it's crazy because you can really play anything, and I think it's really just kind of a skill-based thing. And I do think that the better player does win more frequently in One Piece. I truly do think that happens. Maybe the better players play in a deck that they're not as good on, but you're not a better player on that deck. You're a better player in general, but if I'm not a great red player and I'm playing against a great purple player that I can beat with my green deck, I still lost that matchup, and I think that that'll happen. I would say if it happens probably 9 times out of 10 in Dragon Ball, I would say in One Piece it happens probably like 7 out of 10 times. So very, very close, and it's really not a knock on One Piece at all. I just think it's something that they kind of added to the game and developed. So moving on from that piece, we're going to talk about that card game space piece that we were talking about in the intro of the game before we talk about kind of how we think that Bandai developed card games as they've kind of released things. So where I think that people are happy, I think that if you're a casual player, kind of like we were talking about before though, casual player, somebody who doesn't know a lot about card games, but they're not looking for a deep dive card game as their main card game right now, or they're not looking for something to dedicate that much time and energy to, and they want something more fun. I think that falling into that kind of casual card space, I think you would enjoy One Piece and Digimon. One of the things about One Piece is that I think that it is going to tag for both ends of the spectrum. I think that casual players and competitive players are both going to enjoy playing One Piece almost equally. But I think that if you're looking for something to like deep dive into and you're only looking for one, I think that finding your space, either the 1, 2, or the 3, because I think that some players are smack dab in the middle where they're like, I want more competitiveness, but I'm not like super crazy competitive and I'm not super crazy casual. I think that those people exist too, and I think that you're going to fall into the One Piece space. But just kind of tagging on to kind of how to identify yourself as, am I really a casual player? If you are kind of some of the things that we talked about before and those are hitting for you, those are definitely some casual traits. But even if you just want to play a card game, or if you're newer to card games, you're trying to develop your skills in card games, so maybe you're playing something else and you're like, man, I'm getting out resourced all the time. Like I need to learn how to manage my tempo myself through the game. Yo, come jump on Digimon for a little while, because it's going to be a really good game where you can win a lot of games, and if you can go back and analyze your data, you're going to get better at almost everything. You're going to get better at hand resource, even though the hand resource in your hand isn't crazy impactful because there's not interaction in the game. You'll still learn how to not run out of Digivolution cards in your hand, how to not play out the wrong cards so that you can't Digivolve, and things like that, right? You'll still pick up all those skills, and you'll still get better at almost everything, honestly. As far as like card game mechanics from Digimon, I think that those will develop really well into other card games. But how to identify yourself if you're just kind of in the middle and you just don't know like what kind of card game I'm looking for, trying One Piece I think will identify a lot for you. I think one of the things for One Piece that works for it is that it caters so much to both the casual and the competitive, right? You can play a deck that is very high like variance. I would say that like Kinemon can be kind of high variance. It's very consistent because it can draw a lot, but like how you start the game, how you finish the game, and how you kind of go about your mini game is very just dependent on different players. Some people like to play out their cards that rest down your opponent's characters and just swing into those until your opponent runs out of resources, which is how I like to play the game. I think it's very strong, but I've seen people play a very aggressive Kinemon leader where they're just swinging out with everything. Everything's strong, everything's dying because they're swinging back into it, and then everything's still reduced on their next turn. And it's really just up to you how you wanna play. But for One Piece, you can really pick up like any deck and really just kind of discover where you want to go for that card game or for that playstyle, and for yourself for like for the future. And then just quickly touching on Dragon Ball Super, that game just being the most competitive. I think that if you're a competitive player, you know it. If you're looking for bigger events, if you're trying to top 32 everything, if you're trying to top 16 everything, if you're trying to top 4 every event that you're playing in, you want to move into like a more competitive space. You want to move into some place where other people are going to challenge you a lot, and the people in the Dragon Ball Super community are going to challenge you. A lot of the people have been playing the game since it came out. They're super talented, and they truly understand the different colors that they master. There's so many different spaces to exist in different card games, and if you're looking for a competitive challenge, I think that Bandai has brought a little bit of everything. They've brought a little bit of casual, a little bit of, I think One Piece is just a really developed game. We'll talk about that with the resource development, but just kind of going through, I think One Piece has a lot to offer. But if you're looking for, if One Piece just isn't doing it for you, and you're playing One Piece and you're like, this is fun, but I want more, I think Dragon Ball Super is that more that a lot of players, maybe not a lot of players, that some players are really itching for. And I think that it's such a competitive space that it's either for people who have been really playing the game for a really long time, or players who like love Dragon Ball and are willing to get a lot better at the game. So I think it's a highly competitive game, and it's going to really test you, because I think it's hard to have fun when you're not winning consistently. And like I said before in Dragon Ball, it's like 90% the better player will win, unless you're playing like a crazy aggro deck and it's like your opponent just doesn't really have the answers to it. Some people can argue that those are kind of the lower skill decks that can make that 10%, but it's really at the end of the day the better player is going to win in that game. So moving on from that, let's talk about Bandai and kind of how they've developed everything going forward, and where I think they've come from as far as going from card game to card game. Starting off with Dragon Ball Super, just kind of like as a rough kind of throwing out a lot of the things that I think that they ran into with that game. With how many players really flock to Digimon compared to Dragon Ball, it's really going to be easier to compare the transition. I think that Digimon was just a lot more inviting for people. I think that people, when I say that people laugh more playing Digimon, I truly mean that. People cackle during that game, you know what I mean? People will be on the opposite end of the tournament arena. You'll hear people talking about their crazy security bomb that flips it at the very end, right? And that's so inviting to so many people when you're playing the game and you're like, oh, this is so simple, I can just pick this up and play 6 games in a row. That's so attractive, and I think that's something that Bandai was just like, we want something for more people to be able to come into. Looking at where they were at with Dragon Ball, I think that it was hard for people to jump into because of the price point of some of the promo cards at the time when Digimon released, as well as just kind of the skill cap of the game. It's really a hard game to just jump into. And they switched over from having every card in the deck be kind of an energy resource to the 10 energy on each side. It's not really energy, 10 memory on each side system, even though that is from Chrono Clash. It is something that they adopted for that game. And with with that, I think that was a really good idea, because when you're looking at Dragon Ball Super's energy style, where you can just go for infinity, you can never have too many energy. Having like 16 energy Beerus decks that can just kill you when they're on 16 energy because they ramp up so much. To compare that to having a cap at 10 and both players can only get up to 10, but it's in the hands of your opponent. I think that's where the big issue was. Having a cap of 10 on each side, I think, is a really good way to attack resource management and resource just resources in a card game. But having it be controlled by your opponent can be kind of iffy. You can play memory tamers to kind of control this like mid game space of like a healthy amount of memory for both players to have. But if you're playing a game where you don't have a chance to play a memory tamer, or if you play the memory tamer you lose because they cost so much, it really sucks getting set to 1 over and over and over and over again. And that leads us into why I think the Dawn system is so good in One Piece. So outside of just like the draw system, the countering from hand, and how that affects the resource management in the game, looking at the Dawn system and that being the main mechanic that lets you play the game, I think comparing that to the Digimon card game, they're both going to be games where you can only get up to 10 of said resource, so it's 10 on each player's side. But with One Piece, you're tempoed, so you're going to be on 1, your opponent's going to be at 2, you're going to be on 3, your opponent's going to be on 4, and you play this ping pong match all the way until you're up to 10. But there's not a lot that your opponent can do in the game outside of Magellan to keep you off of your own Dawn curve. Even when you're playing purple, that does a lot of Dawn minusing effects and a lot of Dawn minusing abilities, you still at the end of the day will have general control of your Dawn curve. And when you activate those effects, you're not really pushed into the corner very often where you're like, oh dang, I have to 10 drop Kaido here even though I'll lose on the next turn, right? Or anything like that. So having it be where it's 10 on each player's side and you ping pong back and forth, and tempo is kind of always neck and neck unless you're playing a ramp style deck. But even those ramp style decks end up Dawn minusing themselves to a point where there's going to be a turn or two where they're below you on general resource. I think that having it be balanced is actually like not like the perfect resource management or the perfect like kind of curve, but I think it's fantastic. Having Dawn be so much like interaction on your board, they can buff your cards, they can make your weak card stronger, they can like attack into your opponent's character, not Dawn themselves attacking, but making characters that can't attack into your opponent's characters is super interesting and a super cool way to attack like a resource management kind of style in a card game. I don't really know how to phrase this, so it's been kind of hard when I'm referring back to it. But just looking at it, I think that the Dawn system in One Piece is just a upgrade from the memory system in Digimon. I don't think that there's a lot wrong with the memory system in Digimon, because at the end of the day, you're still able to play. And where we're at in Digimon now, being on BT12 releasing pretty soon, we're so far and ahead of where we were when BT1 released. I definitely think that there's been a lot of upgrades made to the memory system, and I think that it's in a decent place right now. But where we're at with One Piece, I think we're just not going to run into those issues where your opponent is just like choking you out of what you can do. You're always going to be able to play the game. It's going to be up to you to build your deck in a way that you see your answers and have answers in your deck. So yeah, that kind of brings everything together. We're just going to really quickly kind of like wrap it up and talk about just kind of what my thoughts on the Bandai card game space. As a player who has been playing all of Bandai's card games, I played in Dragon Ball Super regionals. I played in Dragon Ball Super it was before the Zenkai Cups, but whatever those cups were that they were webcams, I was playing like Gogeta, Black Gogeta at the times, you know? I played those. I played everything Digimon, regionals, Nats, every type of cup. The only thing I haven't played in, I guess, is a pre so far, but I'll probably be doing a pre this upcoming year for the channel. And then also playing One Piece. I've played Battle Spirits as well, but that's kind of outside of the spectrum of what we're talking about today. But I played everything, and honestly, everything feels like it has a place, right? When I'm playing Digimon, I definitely do feel the casualness, and I can enjoy it now that I've taken myself out of that being my main card game. For me personally, I'm more so on the competitive side of everything. Like I said, Dragon Ball Super is my favorite game, so I guess I'm on the far competitive end of the spectrum there. But for me, Digimon is something that now that I'm playing a lot, putting a lot more time in my competitive nature, playing those casual games is a lot more fun, and that's something that for me has made enjoying those card games, or that card game, just a lot better. So I've just been loving Digimon. Playing Dragon Ball is obviously just my love at the end of the day. I really want to get my invite to Nats this year. I'd love to go to Nats this year and play just some deck. No idea what the deck idea would be or what the meta is going to look like that far down the line, but I do want to go to Nats for Dragon Ball, and obviously I want to go to Nats and everything for One Piece. So altogether, it's been, for One Piece, there's just, I've said so much good stuff about it throughout the video, so I think you guys can tell that I love One Piece as well. I'm not sure if it's going to take over as my number one game. It just kind of depends on where the community for Dragon Ball Super goes and how much it's supported. Sometimes the community for Dragon Ball Super can be super welcoming. I've seen some stuff online and experienced some stuff in person as well. So it's just like kind of teetering back and forth, right? For me, the One Piece community is huge. So it's really hard to fall into the same problems that you see in Dragon Ball Super. But you just never know. We'll see how the next year goes. This online client's coming out for Dragon Ball Super. We have Battle Spirit Saga coming out as well. It's going to be, spoiler alert, on the more competitive side in my opinion, but we're learning a lot actually about, like, when I'm teaching people about what they're enjoying about Battle Spirits as a casual game too. So we might just see Bandai with another hit on their hands. But if you guys want to hear more about my opinions about stuff like this, and you guys want to see more videos like that, like this, comment that down below. Let me know. I'm super willing to bring more stuff like this to the channel. It's just that getting all of these thoughts into one place has been just like a lot, right? I've been talking to so many people, and there's so many different people that feel differently about different topics. If I did bring something up during the video as well, and I kind of didn't circle back to it, or I kind of like glazed over it, leave a comment down below, because it might have just gotten edited out. But yeah, that's gonna wrap up everything I have to say about this video. So this is me, Jamonster, with Opus Gaming, and I'm out. Thanks for tuning in, you guys.